Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Ruth Larson, and I am a member of the James City County School Board. I just went back. Woo! I was a proud member of the Williamsburg James City County School Board for 10 years, but I am now in my 7th year on the James City County Board of Supervisors. But I would like to introduce you to our panel today. First, I'll start with Meg Bohmke. Meg was first elected to the Stafford County Board of Supervisors in November 2013 after serving a term on the school board. Meg has served twice as chairman of the Board of Supervisors and vice chairman. She serves on the Regional Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Committee for Transportation, the George Washington Regional Commission, the Regional Library Board of Trustees, and Bay Consortium for Workforce, and she is completing her presidency for the Virginia Association of Counties. She served a term as a lay member on the 6th District Virginia State Bar Disciplinary Committee and was the finance coordinator for the Rappahannock Area Regional Adult Education Program for 8 years, but now works full-time at her elected responsibilities. While on the school board, she served on the Stafford County Park and Recreation Commission and the Head Start Policy Council and chairman of the Regional Communications Commonwealth Governor School Board. Yes, thank you. She received her Bachelor of Science degree from Florida State University in 1981. She has lived in Virginia for 25 years after moving from Southern California, where she worked in public finance for 13 years. Teddy Martin has served on the Henry County School Board since 2017. He currently serves as VSBA's, I don't think, president-elect, right? President, yes. And co-chair of the VSBA Task Force on Workforce Readiness. He previously served as chair of the Blue Ridge region. Teddy has earned the association's highest level of recognition, the Award of Distinction. Each year he has served on his local board and was recognized as the 2020 VSBA Blue Ridge Regional Member of the Year. In addition, Teddy represented the association as a representative on the governor's COVID-19 education work group. In his day job, Teddy is the Human Resource Generalist at Patrick and Henry Community College in Martinsville. He is a graduate of Patrick and Henry Community College and Old Dominion University. Teddy is a proud older brother to 4 younger siblings who inspired him to run for school board. Passionate about serving the community, Teddy organizes the largest regular Red Cross blood drives in the area in memory of his Aunt Brenda semi-annually. Jeremy Bennett has served as VACo Director of Intergovernmental Affairs since 2018. In this role, he advocates for the priorities of the association in the fields of K-12 education, commerce and labor, and general government, among others. Prior to this, Jeremy served as Government Relations Specialist with the Virginia School Boards Association, and before that as a congressional staffer for several members of Congress. He is a graduate of Colgate University. J.T. Kessler joined the VSBA staff as Government Relations Specialist in March 2019, bringing over 15 years of experience in government and politics. Needing a break from full-time politics, J.T. spent 9 years teaching high school government, economics, and United States history to public school students in North Carolina. Prior to joining the VSBA, J.T. served as political director with the North Carolina Nurses Association, where he led fundraising efforts for the association's Political Action Committee and executed grassroots legislative advocacy tactics at the North Carolina General Assembly. JT has a graduate degree in public administration from Central Michigan University and an undergraduate degree in secondary education from Bowling Green State University. So that is our panel. Also would like to recognize Gina Patterson, who is sat all the way in the back, but she is the Executive Director of Virginia School Boards Association. Thank you for being here, Gina. So if I could, I'd like to start by asking Meg and then Teddy to give a brief overview of VACo and VSBA partnership, how it came into being, and I'm going to pass this. Executive directors are attending meetings of each association's board of director. Executive directors are attending both annual conferences, task force, etc. So they'll go into a little bit more of their relationship. Diana White.
Okay. Thank you.
This portion.
Okay. Welcome, and I just want to say that, you know, all of us in the Commonwealth, our largest partner agency is our school division. And that's what we care so much about in the Commonwealth. And we just decided that this partnership had to be. And so VSBA started coming to our annual conference and vice versa. So it's a short marriage that just started, and we look forward to, but it's going to be a very long marriage, but it's been short thus far. And we're really looking forward to a lot of productive things that come out of this relationship.
I want to thank you all for inviting me and having me here, and you know, very much enjoying and looking forward to, I guess, that long marriage is referenced there of this partnership. There's so many things, and as President Bohmke said, largely for many of our localities, the school division is the largest portion of the budget. It is, for me as a school board member, and I'm glad to see some fellow former school board members, it's critical to your economic development and the futures of your communities. So I'm very grateful, and I'm glad to see this partnership develop as we recognize how much we have in common cause and how important we are to each other. And I guess I will pass the mic back.
So maybe you can talk about what goes into creating a good relationship between the two boards.
So when I was on the school board, I talked to my colleague on the Board of Supervisor quite frequently, sometimes 5 or 6 times a week. We had a very good working relationship. We are a growing community in Stafford, and we many times did not agree on things because she always wanted to lower taxes. And so I would just talk about what our capital improvement needs were and where our teacher salaries needed to be, and really everything across the board. And so finally what she did is she said, you know what, Meg, there's so many disconnects going on between the Board of Supervisors and the school board. I think we need to establish what's called a 3-on-3. And that's what we did. And we had 3 school board members and 3 Board of Supervisors. And the school board appointed them. Mostly it was people that raised their hand. And the same thing on the Board of Supervisors. And we set up quarterly meetings, and I'll call it the 3-on-3 would get together, and we would rotate it from their side of the street to our side of the street. At those meetings, there were never, of any of the meetings that I attended, there were no reporters there. There were no votes that were taken. Staff was there, and it was really for new school board members and new Board of Supervisors to have a dialogue about what goes on in their world, okay? Because many supervisors, if you have not been a school board member, you really don't understand all the intricacies of education. You know, if you've got a 2,500 pupil high school, how many assistant principals do you need there? And how many, you need one principal, but how many assistant principals? How do they go about funding? We didn't realize this, but our school division funded the attrition at 100%. Well, think about it. How can they do that? They are not going to employ 100% of the teachers and all the instructional aides and all the workers 100% of the time throughout the entire school calendar year. So they started funding the budget more like 97%. Well, that adds up quite a bit. So it was really these 3-on-3 discussions that were really instrumental, and we had quarterly meetings, and at the beginning of each year, in fact, one year when I was on the school board, one lady, one of our school board members didn't have any children in schools, and she said, well, I'd really like to serve on that committee. And I said, fine, you can have my spot. She had my spot. I'll never forget this. She came back and said in public, we had our 3-on-3 meeting, and wow, I found out that the Board of Supervisor people are really nice. She hadn't said that before, but that's only because we were having conversations. We were talking about building capacity versus design capacity. All of you that are familiar with your schools, you know a school is designed for 2,000 students, right? But that's not, it's not, 25 kids in every classroom, because you have special ed and you have autistic classes and all kinds of different programs. So we argued about that quite a bit, because they would say, the supervisors would say, well, your schools, they're not full. You've got 150 extra seats in this school. No, we don't. And let me tell you why. So that just gives you a little bit of information about our 3-on-3. And it's, I will tell you, the entire 3-on-3 is all about communication. Because if you don't communicate and you can't ask questions, then you're not going to make improvements.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say, from my experience and perspective, it was actually wonderful to have, and unfortunately he recently passed away, but my ace in the hole was Mr. Francis Zare was my mentor. He had been a member of the Board of Supervisors, so I had the opposite. I had a member of the Board of Supervisors on the school board going like, this is kind of how this works, or how it was during my time on the Board of Supervisors, or when I was the chair of the Board of Supervisors, or so forth, and getting that perspective, as well as, ironically, his son is the current Board of Supervisor member for his district. So I had a relatively easy in with, hey, here's how it's going on the school board, and how things were. But I think a lot of it does go back to that notion of building community and understanding rather than division, and the notion of this is the facts that we see, and this is what's going on, and whether that be touring the schools, whether that be what factors are leading to these things. So for example, with me, the reason I ran for school board was actually my little sister is in elementary school, was doing a recital at the high school, and there were trash cans in the hallways collecting rainwater, and I just looked at that, and we had a budget issue, and I'm like, I just can't see that. I don't understand that. And there were public hearings, and my predecessor board member had passed away, so that's what caused me to run, and that's what caused that to be a very vital issue for me to try to address in my community, and was able to work with the Board of Supervisors and the school board to try to get the funding to address that issue. And currently, there's not very much in the way of leaking roofs in Bassett High School, thanks to the Board of Supervisors and the school board working together on that. But that caused that discussion of some of those school infrastructure issues that we have throughout the state. It's not just Bassett High School. It's not just my sister. It's not just me. It's all of us. So many of our localities are faced with issues with funding and LCIs and this, that, and the other. And it's going to take all of us working together, pooling our resources, whether that be the counties, the school boards, etc., in order to get statewide mechanisms to address this across the board. So we were very happy to start a task force on school infrastructure needs, and I was very pleased that President Bohmke joined us with that, and many of the members over here with the counties having some of that school board experience, so that back and forth of mutual understanding. And I will just say that the one thing I would say is it's great working with the member from your district, but I feel like you got to play every card in the deck. So you got to have a relationship with every member that you can, and be as open and receptive and communicative as they'll let you be. I will say, if I did 5 or 6 times a week, though, they would block me. I'll just say that.
So the next question, Meg, is how did being a former member of the school board change your perspective, or what did that bring to your board supervisor role?
And I will say, when I spoke to my colleague that many times, we were building a $120 million high school. So it was a lot of angst regarding that. So that's what precipitated that. Yes, and the question was,
What your perspective when you got onto the Board of Supervisors,
yes.
because you've been a school board member, how did that?
okay, so one thing that I noticed is in the county audit, on the cover letter, there was a reference to the school division in like the next to the last paragraph. And it wasn't as positive as it should have been. It was almost like the school division was a burden on the county. It wasn't that bad, but it was, considering, you know, the school division used $120 million of county funds, that school division is an asset as far as I'm concerned. And it wasn't the auditor that wrote that, it was former county administrator. So I will tell you, at my very first meeting in Stafford County, we have committee meetings before our 3 o'clock Board of Supervisor meeting and the 7 o'clock meeting. And every opportunity I got, I would say, have you talked to the school division about this? Have you talked to your colleagues? Do we know what the superintendent thinks about this? And they got tired of hearing from me. But you know what? It made a difference. And now and this has been the case for quite a few years, the county administrator and the superintendent get together and they have lunch every month. They talk all the time. And they should be. But it took, and now we have another member from our school board on the Board of Supervisors. But that really was kind of the turning point, is just saying, well, have you weighed in? I mean, look at what we're talking about right now in the workforce world. And if you were in the education meeting, and you'll see this tomorrow when we vote on our legislative platform, we've moved workforce up as one of our priorities. Because we have to get to these elementary, middle, and high school kids, and the elementary and middle so much sooner. And I thought it was really great that the Secretary of Labor said, Secretary of Education is right down the hall from me, and we collaborate all the time, and they have to. It is of paramount importance as far as I'm concerned. If we're really going to make a difference with our young people and with our workforce in Virginia. So I just kept pounding that drum over and over again, and before I knew it, the entire board realized, you know, the school division, we've got a lot of partner agencies, but they are an enormous asset. As we know, being on the boards, what do our new future employers look at? What are your schools like? If I'm going to bring 500 employees here, they're going to want to know that you have a good school division. So,
Thank you. I think that's great. I think that is great tips. And I would just add that our superintendent and our county administrator have a great relationship as well, and so do both CFOs, which I think has helped. And we have a board that is, I think, very supportive of education. I think one perspective that I did bring was I could still be I still had friends on the school board. So I was able to, you know, and I'll tell you, those conversations sometimes get heated, even today, but you're still talking. So, and I think communication is the key. So you all have talked about some different ways that you coordinate between your two boards, your 3-on-3, and then Teddy, your task force. In WJCC, what we did pre-COVID is the James City County Board of Supervisors went up with the school board to the legislative day and met with our legislators together. And I believe that was a VSBA initiative that they did. And so hopefully we can get back to that, because it's if you can have some joint, talking to your legislators, it's it's a little bit more powerful. And so that's one thing that we did. And so, wonder if you want to talk a little bit about if you've had interaction with your General Assembly members and if you've taken on education funding, that kind of thing. Maybe that's something that board you could talk about.
Sure, thank you. So in Stafford, we have had a lobbyist for many years. It's changed over the years who the lobbying firm is. But we actually, golly, it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago, on our legislative committee for the Board of Supervisors, we have 2 members that are appointed by the board. And every Friday during the General Assembly, they have Friday meetings and they are updated on all the legislation that we are following. And we asked the school division to appoint somebody as a liaison. And so they are allowed and invited to come over to the Board of Supervisors, or during the virtual time, they would be on virtually. Now, we don't have a formal contract with the school board, but they are updated on everything that comes through our legislative committee. And as you know, we're following a lot of the money issues as well. So they're brought up to speed as quickly as all of our board members are. And we feel that, that's great. We're all not going after the same money, but we all have the interest of our constituents at heart. And we feel like that's being a really good team player.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will say that probably my first experience, at least as a school board member with that, being with the General Assembly, I went with various representatives from the VSBA and Students in Schools and Challenging Environments Task Force, and met with my state senator, which is Bill Stanley. And at the time, I'm not going to say that he wasn't the most outspoken for us on that issue, but since then, he has become quite vocal on the need for school modernization and pushing that in the General Assembly. So I think that's just an example of when you get concerned board members, citizens, including from the district and without, and able to go before and say, here's the issues that we are advocating for, and not look at it from a zero-sum perspective of winners and losers. Look at it from the perspective of, here are some of those things that we need. Like I was able to point to VAC's high school needs. Halifax was able to point to their high school needs, etc. So that's where even some of the notion of 1% legislation or additional revenue streams, etc., originated. I think it was an example of, and it was very early for me to see, the role that, say, a VSBA or a VACo could play in this, and how those collective efforts could cause very significant impacts in our communities. And I felt that that was something I wanted to be more a part of, because that was literally, I would say I'd only been a school board member for a few months at that point. So that was an example to me, and I agree wholeheartedly on the discussions earlier about communication and the importance of your school division and how it is relative to your economic development efforts. Wasn't part of my biography that I was actually surprised to hear myself, but prior to being a school board member, I worked on an economic development project bringing in 500 jobs to my community, and the executives were, tell me about Henry County Public Schools, tell me about Martinsville City Public Schools, tell me about Patrick Community Community College, tell me about what workforce I'm looking at for the next 5 to 10 years, and those middle schoolers and so on. So yeah, everything, I endorse you completely that you said, President Bohmke. We have a hand up.
Well, I'm going to hand it off to Jeremy and JT. If you could just talk a little bit about how VSBA and VACo coordinate on the different legislative priorities and funding.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So just as it is important at the local level for boards of supervisors and school board members to talk and collaborate, it's very important as state associations that as one of VSBA's lobbyists working with Jeremy, you have 4 or 5 lobbyists, I think, for your association. Yeah, but I have to work with every one of VACo's lobbyists, because there's just so many overlapping issues that come at the General Assembly, where yes, Jeremy does the education work, but last year we had a bill that was dealing with construction and some mandates on facilities, and I had to work with Joe on that and working with Senator Favola. So we do a lot of collaboration. We know where each other stand. We know our legislative priorities. We have a lot of overlap. Sometimes there's, some we don't agree on, but that's very rare. And because we tend to, when we go to a committee hearing, we tend to talk the same points. Usually, I may be hitting the local control piece. For example, this last session, we had a bill that would have mandated SROs on every school. Our position is that should be something left up to the local school board. And then Jeremy was able to come in and say, well, if you want to mandate it, fund it. And so there's a little area like that to where, we were able to, hit 2 different points, but also be on the same page.
Those are great points, JT. And first off, let me just start by saying it's great to see Teddy and Gina here at the VACo conference. Having worked for VSBA before I came to VACo, I don't want to say it's similar to serving on the school board and then coming to work for a board of supervisors, but I definitely think that it gave me personally a different perspective that I bring to my role at VACo when we talk about K-12 education. And whereas we don't necessarily wade into some of the issues about what is going on inside a classroom that VSBA might have a legislative position on, we definitely, I think we feel we understand better the issues where we need to work together. As JT mentioned, VACo, our prime directives are local control and fending off unfunded mandates. And I think there's a lot of overlap with VSBA, with school boards on that. So when we are in the General Assembly or we're meeting with a legislator and they say, well, where's VSBA stand on this, or where's VACo? If we're lockstep together, it definitely lends some strength to the power of our arguments. And yeah, the SRO bill is a great example where you have the local control issue certainly, but then if it were to be enacted, it would have cost local governments about $19 million. And that was one where there were legislators who really didn't care so much about the local control argument, that they felt the state had what was in everyone's interest best in mind, but they weren't willing to see their locality spend $5 million for an unfunded position. So I think there's definitely there's a benefit, and I think the associations in the past have maybe collaborated on issues together, but I think this is the first time where we're really trying to make a conscientious effort to work together going forward, because I think we're going to be facing a lot of challenges this coming session, and certainly have in the past. So there's certainly a benefit to collaboration between the associations, and then at the micro level, of course, as hit upon, having your school board and your board of supervisors, when they're in those meetings with legislators, singing from the same hymnal, it definitely lends power to that message.
So just a follow-up question to that. What happens when you run into disagreements in the legislative session, say an unexpected funds issue, and so maybe you don't agree?
Yeah, that happened this year, didn't it? Well, we go outside and we have a knockdown, drag-out fight over at Capitol Square and whoever. There are just going to be some areas where we're not going to find common ground. And the unexpended funds bill that we have a legislative position in support of being able to keep unexpended funds. And we just have to, I have to lobby what my association stands for. And if it's in disagreement, we'll figure it out. I mean, it's very rare that we're in opposition at the General Assembly.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. I think, going back to what I was saying, we have so much in common when it comes to K-12 education policy between the associations, and I think between a lot of school boards and local boards of supervisors. And really 99% of the time, if we have a legislative position on an issue, we're going to be supporting it. And that 1% of that time with the unexpended funds, because we have built up a relationship, and I think this can go for working with your school board as well. If you have that relationship that Meg and Teddy were talking about, but when you do come to those disagreements, it's much easier to get past that rough spot of troubled water. And, you know, I think we negotiated a compromise that, you know, didn't get everything either of us wanted on that. And I think the bill ultimately was killed in the end. But I think it is a testament that you need to have these conversations and again, try to find that common ground so that you can then work together when it gets a little rougher.
So then for Megan Petty, so two-part question, because I'm sure there's been things that have not gone maybe either of your ways in discussions with the school board. How have you handled that? And then what do you do about a contentious funding issue? If the school board has come to you and said, we want a new school, but you and your board are not there yet, or you know you need a new school, but your board of supervisors are not there yet. How do you work through that, and how do you all end up? Because you have to keep working together, so.
I was going to joke, since we're at the VACo conference, I'll let President Bohmke start.
Okay, well, we have a situation in Stafford County right now where our superintendent came to us and has a $1.5 billion ask for new schools. We need a new high school and we need 2 elementary schools. And we're like, well, nobody said anything about 2 elementary schools over the last 3 or 4 years. Now, granted, was everybody, you know, so focused on COVID that they forgot about their building needs? But one thing that the superintendent did that, you know, we didn't think was too kosher, they set up some town halls with each school board member, but they expected us to be there but didn't actually invite us. So, okay, you want us to come and take the heat at your meetings, but yet why didn't you give us a formal invitation? That would have been kind of nice. We kind of heard about it through the grapevine. But I can walk up to the superintendent and very nicely say, you know, you guys kind of did this. We believe it wasn't appropriate. If you want us to come to your town hall, why don't you invite us? I don't think we should have to hear about it through the grapevine. And he needs to hear that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And we can agree to disagree, but so long as we're respectful and diplomatic, that's all that matters. So, you know, and now we're in this situation where we've got to build schools. So that's probably what we're going to have our most contention about. When we built a new middle school a couple years ago, you know, as you know, the architect gets paid, you know, a percentage based on the price of the school. Well, they made the hallways so big, it's like, oh my goodness. You know, I mean, you have to look at things like that. You know, why did you make the hallways 3 feet wider than they needed to be? That would be great. We would like to fund that, but it's not necessary. You know, and so, but now, look at the cost of inflation. You know, all of our transportation funds, some of those have just evaporated based on the inflation, and the same thing with our school costs. So, I hope I answered your question, Ruth.
Did great.
Thank you very much. I will say that, you know, it's true that, and Henry, and I'll watch my words a little bit because my new county administrator's in here, Dale Wagner. But I have to say I have a good working relationship with him. He's even comes and spoke at, I'm the president of the Lions Club in my community as well. He came and spoke to it. One thing I will also say, sort of to President Bohmke's point, you know, it's a matter of communication and persistence. It's a notion of, you know, I'll say this is an issue that I had in the prior administrator's era of some communication lapses, sort of, you know, well, here's how it's going to be type communication. And, you know, we were rather persistent with both the administration as well as the Board of Supervisors members, and a lot of times we were able to come to acceptable compromises or changes of heart or things where you could see that, because, you know, I unfortunately don't necessarily have the, you know, notion of let's go build a new school. It's very much more, here's various capital issues that we've had ongoing for 30, 40, 50 years. or here's a kitchen that was built in the 50s and it's still original to the school, and this school is now in a very different use than it was when it was originally built. It's a lot more of changing, because our community's changed a lot over the last 50 to 70 years. I mean, we went from being manufacturing capital of the world, and here's the governor, the attorney general, the speaker of the house, and everything else, to, you know, we went through all of the manufacturing, offshoring, vast changes in the economy provoked by, you know, free trade agreements, etc. So, you know, how do you address that? How do you face that, especially with political winds, you know, consolidation of schools, things of that nature. My school division hasn't been redistricted since the last consolidation of schools. You know, there's a lot of shifts in our community's growth and also decline in various areas. So it's not so much maybe that you need a new school, it's, you know, where do you need it, what do you need it for, sort of the roof issue. It's a lot of, you know, can I get to next year? Can I address this problem a little later than now? But I will say, you know, again, that perspective of, you know, being persistent, advocating, recognizing each other's needs, really make a difference. And, you know, I feel that one more than a loss, I guess, would be the way I kind of look at it. And I hope that they feel the same. I hope that it's, again, not that zero-sum game of I win, you lose, or anything of that nature. It's not a control thing. It's about what's best for the community.
So interesting that you said that about the meeting, because I think one of the most successful budget meetings that we had in James City County, we invited our school board counterpart to do our town hall with us. And I think that that was good for the community, because we went into our different districts, but they got to hear from the school board member and from the board of supervisor member, and we really weren't to a complete agreement yet, but it got to tell them, you know, that we're working together. We're trying to get there, but the school has real needs as well. And just one little anecdote, and I think I picked this up when I was on the School Boards Association. I remember for our legislative breakfast, we used to go to our shiniest new school, and someone said, why are you going to your shiniest new school with the legislators? Because then you're talking about the fact that you need something, and they're like, we don't need anything, this is a beautiful school. And they said, you need to go to the school where you have the most needs, and you have the trash cans in the hallway, and let them see what you're dealing with. So that's important too. We don't have to always, it's okay to show the flaws that we have. So we are not quite to the end, we've got a couple more minutes, but I was hoping that you each might answer, what do you foresee for the future, both with the partnership and legislatively speaking, gentlemen? What do you think we have coming down the pipe? So what do you see with the future of the partnership?
So one thing that I didn't mention is we do have quite a few shared services in Stafford County with our school board, and I'm sure some of you here have that as well. We have a shared fleet maintenance facility that takes care of all the police cars. We're looking at actually, and obviously the county cars, but we're looking at a new facility that will also take care of the ambulances and the fire trucks, because those they farm out right now because the facility isn't large enough. I will say about 4 years ago, it was the first time ever in Stafford County, you would have two people sitting at the dinner table. Those two are firemen and these two are school teachers. And they would argue about, well, you have better benefits over at the county than we do on the school board. And we finally said, you know what? We are all in the same community. And we worked for 2 years to come up with a health care plan that was for everyone. Now, I will tell you, at the beginning, there was a delta, okay? You can't get here overnight. But we worked on it, and we are so much closer. But as you know, the school division has a lot more employees than we do with the county. So, I think we're almost there. It's taken about 3 years, but that was a major feat. But we are very, very proud of that. And then we also have a Heather Day Enfield. We have our own day school in Stafford County that a woman, Heather Enfield, created about 10 years ago. And unfortunately, she passed away right after it opened. So we actually educate our students with these disabilities in Stafford County, which is really a great program. And we save the state a lot of money by doing that. It's a beautiful arrangement for the parents because the children are put on a bus and, going 45 minutes one way and 45 minutes back the other way. We've worked with the Office on Youth we were on a task force with them to try to implement our program throughout the Commonwealth, but they're not there yet. It's very complex, but they've used our Heather Enfield facility as kind of a model. The last thing I just want to share is that another thing that we do is we actually, the Board of Supervisors and the school board, serve a dinner together at Head Start. And it's another way for us to come together with the community. We typically do it around the holidays. So just, it's extending the olive branch, if you will. And let's try to work better together. And, there's a lot of laughter and we get to see all these wonderful young kids. And so there you have it.
Well, thank you very much. I will say, from where my day job is, I'm currently a HR director at the community college, and I'm becoming an HR director for Gen Edge, Virginia's Manufacturing and Economic Development. To me, I get geeky, nerdy about, those benefits pieces, and I think that's one of those things that's often overlooked. And I think that particularly that's important to look at when we're thinking about things like recruitment and retention of teachers. Or just staff generally, because you're not going to make, and again, as an HR professional, you're not going to make anything run if you don't have any staff to do it. And it's even one thing I've told the school board and why bus drivers are particularly important to me, because I've said I don't care how good our programming is, if we can't get the kids there to get to it, it doesn't matter. So that is an essential element, and I think that's something also that our new county administrator, Mr. Wagner, and I have spoken about, is the importance especially of, and we share benefits as you mentioned, but the notion of how do we make it affordable or realistic for someone to have a family and work for our county or our school board, because realistically, if we're going to build that community back, we're going to have to be able to support the development of families, and we can't have it to where people who are willing to serve us can't protect and serve their own families. So realistically, that's a critical element for us, and I love your point about the service together and all, because while we do have, say, those joint meetings, they tend to occur around, hey, I need money. And I think if you have those relationships outside of it, including on a more formal basis than the members individually reaching out, you might see better outcomes. So I'd love to take that back and with our counterparts and see if that's not something we could do in Henry.
Well, I'm going to try to do this without taking, let's at least letting Jeremy have something to say, because we were talking about the legislative session and what I'm kind of thinking about. So I think I'm going to take this from the school board side, so you will have something to say. I think we're going to see a lot of pressure on making or trying to mandate that our school boards spend their remaining ESSER dollars in, especially on learning recovery. I think it is seems to be the talking points that we're getting from both sides of the aisle, from members of the General Assembly, Governor's Office, so on and so forth. So we're going to see a lot of there. I'm really concerned about the revenue forecast. I was at House Appropriations today. It does seem to me And in the knowledge that I got when I got a minor in economics, that what the Fed is doing is really slowing the economy down, and they have to because of the inflation. That's to get that under control. And it does seem to be like non-withholding monies, which has really been a big part of the budget the last couple of years. It could come in lower, and how does that affect funding and school construction? We'd like to get another donation or another appropriation into into the second year of the biennial. We were very, very thankful for what the General Assembly did last year, and that's where our task force on school infrastructure comes into play, advocating for that. There's all kinds of stuff coming. I'm very concerned about the economy right now, and I don't know if we're going to go into a mild recession, or whether it's just going to be a blurb, and then we're back into revenues. But so that's kind of where I see things.
Yeah, thank you, JT, and I wish I could attend House Appropriations, but we had something else going on this morning here. But I think, revenues are going to be key in determining whether the state can continue to make investments towards school construction or towards SFQ funding. We've seen over the past 2 or 3 years that we've had the support cap in place since the recession. And we all know that local governments were all paying, $4 billion above what is required by the state of Virginia. And instead of having a 55% share of local and state as it is under the SOQs, in actuality, local governments are paying 55% of that bill, and the state's only covering 45%. So the past few years, we've seen first with $50 million, then $100 million, and now with $150 million, the state is slowly inching us back towards what it was funding support position levels prior to the Great Recession. So there's still about, and Jim Resball's not here, so he can't fact check me on this, but there's still about $270 million to get us back to where we were in terms of those levels of funding. And it seems that there's a desire, at least to my knowledge among some members of the Senate, to keep pushing that envelope and trying to help local governments. Because if you pay for those services that you're already paying for, that frees up money that can then go towards school construction or whatever sort of use in that locality. And speaking of school construction, yes, that $1.25 billion was a great down payment, but we're dealing with a $25 billion need. And I think one of the things that unites us the most is, in terms of the issues that we care about, is the issue of school construction. JT and I were fortunate enough to travel across the state last year as a tour of crumbling school infrastructure that was organized by the Coalition of Small and Rural Schools. Keith Carrigan, the superintendent of Bristol City Schools, his organization. And no child should have to go to school with water dripping on their head, or an AC that doesn't work and it's 85, 90 degrees out there. And I think it helped a lot to move the needle and move that conversation so that we could get that funding. But if the General Assembly is not going to provide continued maintenance of effort in either of the 2 school construction grant forms, it really should look at localities and give us more revenue-raising options. We work together very closely on the 1% local sales and use tax approved by voter referendums, currently enjoyed by 9 localities. Every locality now that has had a referendum on that issue, they have passed them. Most recently is Pennsylvania County. It was a 52 to 48% vote. And unfortunately, we had 2 statewide bills last year. It made it through the Senate with bipartisan support, 28 to 12. And then it was unfortunately laid on the table early Friday morning in House Finance Subcommittee. And I know that there are some localities and school boards that are going to bring standalone bills again this year, and there may be more. Haven't had full confirmation of that. And I believe there will also be the statewide bills, and they may be the similar fate. But I think the message needs to be that we need to continue the pressure on the General Assembly that you either keep your maintenance of effort or you give us the tools to fix these problems ourselves. So, I'm very thankful that we have, a better partnership with the VSBA. The the work that JC and I do on behalf of our membership and trying to, advocate for our priorities in the General Assembly. It's great to have allies and it's great to have partnerships. And I think, we're talking about this at the macro level, but you all, I think there's opportunities for that, working with your school boards and with your legislative delegations. So that's kind of the message we want to bring, that I think we're in this together and we need to keep up the pressure on our shared priorities.
Great, thank you all. Now this is, we'll get to questions in just 1 minute, but this is just a question to you all. Do you think it matters to your community? You can always have your disagreements between the two bodies, but do you think in the end that it matters to your community that the two of you are working together towards the same goal, which is for an outstanding education for the young people in your community? So I think that's important. And so when you're doing things like legislating together and they see that, so you can have your disagreements at the board table, but if they see that you have a common goal, I think that's so important. And as one of our board members on VACo likes to say all the time, and it's something to remind your legislators of, there is no surplus as long as there's still bills that have not been paid. So we hear a lot about the surplus in the Commonwealth of Virginia. There's a lot of outstanding bills that are still due. But with that, I'd love to have some questions for the panel, if anyone has a question. You just did such a good job. Yes, sir.
I really like the idea that one way that the school board or supervisors can work together is if they have shared services. And of course, transportation became, just popped in my head because we're in a position now in Nelson County where we're getting some electric buses, and we may have an opportunity to, serve, the county staff as well as the fleet, both fleets concurrently. And that to me is like maybe the low-hanging fruit. Do you have any examples or other ideas besides benefits? There might be shared services that we might be able to highlight that can help unify the two.
I know in James City County, we share, the county does all the landscaping for the schools, which was not the way that it was. So that has saved some money there. I'm trying to think real fast, but.
This isn't about shared services, but when I first came on the board, I found out that a lot of our parks, where there are athletic events in the evenings through Park and Recreation, the county was charging the school division. We're like, wait a minute, these are parks that the taxpayers have already paid for. And now you're going to charge them $150, $200 to use a park that they've already paid for? No, they don't do it anymore. But I'm trying to think of other shared services.
We have that agreement with our schools. We put the fields in, we maintain the fields. They use them during the day, but we like them so that we can use them on the weekends and at night for rec and for sports tourism too. So we're able to work out that partnership with them.
I would just want to go back a little bit to educating the public. So we have a few dilemmas in our county. You might remember back in 2010 when there was a constitutional amendment on the ballot, and it was for our disabled veterans, which is so important. We all love our veterans. The only thing is it was an unfunded mandate by the state. That unfunded mandate for Stafford County is $11.5 million. It has done nothing but go up like this. Loudoun, Fairfax, and of course the Norfolk area where there are many military people have the same thing. So those are dollars that have just, they're not there. And so we have to explain that to our public. Those are real dollars. We also had, there was a budget amendment a couple of years ago, and this happened to all you counties. They took our recordation tax. $1 million of our recordation tax that was stuck in a budget amendment at the very end. And Hampton Roads got that for the tunnel. We have fought ever since then because we were going to use that $1 million to repay our bonds that were approved by our voters. Gone. But we're still fighting for it because we're just like, this is, you took our money. It was our recordation tax money. So we have to educate our public. And as you know, we have an income tax in Virginia. So people in our locality say, you know, Stafford County is the 3rd wealthiest county in the Commonwealth. We used to be, I think we're 10 now. Well, it doesn't matter what your wealth is, because that's based on your income tax. It's based on your school funding. So I think it all goes, we're trying to do a better job of educating the public how our schools are funded. I think that's just so important, and that message needs to be conveyed. The other thing I want to say, and I've said this to some of my colleagues, they're like, the school board always has money left over. And I'm like, well, what do you want them to do? Go in the red? You know, that's good budgeting. And guess what? We have money left over every year too. But they don't look at their own lens. And you know what? We're happy they have money left over. We do have to reappropriate it to them. And we have money left over. We know what our budget department does. They project revenues low and expenses high. You don't have to be a mathematician to figure that out. But, you know, I just remember telling them, you know, we do the same thing. And we don't, you know, if it's a $250 million budget, I don't want them to have $500,000 left over. They better have a little bit more money than that, or maybe we need to make some changes over there, right? You guys agree? Yeah?
Anybody want to add to that?
I'll just say again, I think it comes back to that mindset, as President Bohmke is saying. It's not a my or a your, it's an ours. It's a recognition that it's a community. And I think, you know, and some of the things I would say, Henry, have kind of already been alluded to. But for me, again, aside from the mindset piece, it's one thing I've noticed on both sides, it's a lot of all or nothing. And, you know, it should be more about those incremental, what can I do today to get us closer to that, rather than thinking I need to do everything like that. So if we can, you know, come up with that 5-10-year plan, recognizing things can change, things happen, inflation, historic, et cetera. But that would be an example to me of, you know, how do we over time make those things occur, rather than they either have to be this way perfectly or they're not going to happen at all.
Does anyone have any other questions? Oh, Jeremy?
Oh yeah, I was just going to add on to the point that Meg brought up regarding revenues and how the state calculates the local composite index when it's calculating income as part of an account as well when we have no ability to tax that. And I put this being Bonnet of our education steering committee, but for those of you who don't attend that committee, just wanted to let you know that JLARC is currently doing a 2-year study of SOQ funding formula that includes looking specifically at the LCI and how it is compiled and what that means for local governments, for school boards. And I know that VACo staff, we had a multi-hour interview with JLARC about this, and I'm sure they reached out to VSBA as well. So the first the first portion that's coming out this year should be in the month of November, the next couple of weeks. So VACo will of course write about it, publish, put it out to our members, but there's a potential there, depending on what they find, to give us ammunition to take to the General Assembly, to the governor, to show where there are discrepancies or inequities in the current funding formula. And the other point I just wanted to hit upon, not to reopen the unexpended funds conversation, but when you talk about, and Teddy mentioned this, and Meg mentioned this, we talk about school boards engaging in communication and realizing that they're in it together with their locality and vice versa. There are a number of localities across the Commonwealth that currently have voluntary MOUs between their boards of supervisors and their school boards, where at the end of the year, if there are unexpended funds, the school board may retain them going forward and use them for things like capital purchases. Now, the VACo position is we don't want to, force that ever, but the point being that if you develop a relationship between the two governing bodies, you can forestall the need for certain legislators in the General Assembly who, in their locality, I'm not naming names, there is dysfunction between the city council and the school board that leads to legislation that ends up pitting VACo, VSBA, and our members against each other. So, if we want to forestall those mandates, but that means that we do need to work together to avoid having someone in the GA come and say, no, I need to tell you how to live your lives and how to manage your schools or your locality. So just two points to add on to that.
Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our session, but I'm sure that you all are willing to stick around for a minute. Meg's got to go teach a stretching yoga class here in a few. But if you have any additional questions, please come up and ask the panel. Thank you all so much for coming, and great job.